Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Player to Coach Pod. This is episode 9. We got our former teammate Michael Loomis on the pod, and it was a really good conversation. Really good to catch up with him. He's a special guy on and off the court. Um, Dude gets buckets. I mean, it's plain and simple. And dude puts up numbers. We talk about his stats later on in the pod, and you guys get to kind of see that. But just a great player, great dude. What do you think?
Yeah, I was really looking forward to having Mike on. I had an audio and video malfunction, technical difficulty, so got booted early from the conversation. But um, yeah, it was still good to chat with him for the short time that I was on and everything. Michael is a great teammate. I got to finish my career with him at NCU. So yeah, it was really cool. He's a he's a really I think he's a really in-depth type of person. Um, and so he likes to, analyze things and study things, and he's a super smart dude. Yeah, it was good to hear from him and his thoughts on things.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think deep is definitely the perfect way to describe him because he dives into some things. You're like, well, I didn't think you were gonna go there. But yeah, he's very thoughtful, very intentional about everything that he does. He talks a lot about his health. Obviously, we get into this a lot. A big part of his story is injuries. Big part of his story is health, being able to fight through some pretty major injuries and whatever. But yeah, it talks about the mental, the physical, nutrition. Everything. That you can do to help your body perform. Another thing about having Michael on is that we want to have him on again. So I talk about this a little bit later towards the end of the podcast, but this is a guy that we're going to have on for a few more discussions. So if you like what you heard or will hear in the rest of the podcast, stay tuned for more because we're going to have him on again. Anyway, let's go ahead and get to the interview with Michael. All right, what's going on, everybody? We have a super special guest today. We've got our former teammate Michael Loomis in the house. How you doing, Michael? Dude, it's really good to see you.
I'm great, man. It's a pleasure and honor to be asked to be a guest on the show, so I'm excited to chop it up today.
All of our millions of viewers and listeners clamoring to get you on the pod, so I'm really glad we can pull it off for them.
I'm glad to help the fans, man.
For sure. Let's go and dive right into it. Can you just talk a little bit about where you're from, kind of how you got into basketball, kind of leading up to your high school career?
Yeah, so I've been basically I was born in Nairobi, Kenya, but raised for most of my life in Westland, Oregon. And so I grew up around the game. My grandpa was a three-time All-American at Purdue. He played on the 1960 Olympic team with Jerry Lucas, Oscar Robertson, Jerry West, won a gold medal with those boys, was the third leading scorer on that team, was rookie of the year when it was voted on by the players. It was actually funny. So when they were talking about Kyrie being a part-time player, my grandpa was the only other part-time player in addition to Kyrie Irving. So he got a shout
What?
out. Yeah, because he was going to dental school and then playing on the weekend. So he was taping his ankles in the car on the way to games and would go play. And so he
Jeez.
was crazy, man. But he was voted on by the players rookie of the year, was a three-time All-Star, and then, had went into the service for a couple years, and had some injuries, and kind of his career ended early. But I mean, I grew up around that. My dad played at Harvard and Stanford. My mom played volleyball at Oregon, was a basketball player. So I grew up around the game. From 1, 2 years old, I had a ball in my hands. There's a picture of me in Cabo at 3 years old, and like my great grandma, my grandpa that played in the NBA, his mom, if I shot the ball, she wouldn't let me just throw it up at the hoop, right? If it was a little hoop in the living room, like she was correcting my form at 2, 3 years old. Like she would stop me, correct my form. And so there's a picture of me 3 years old in Cabo, like with a shot, like great form, which is kind of funny. But so I think the thing for me, man, my goal was always I wanted to play professional basketball. I didn't really know overseas was a thing growing up, but always the NBA, because I saw it, right? That's the power of belief, like seeing something and someone who has done it before you and you spend time around them, like it seemed normal. And so, I mean, ball was, I played a lot of sports growing up, baseball, soccer, basketball. I kind of more focused on basketball and dropped the other sports in junior high, but um, yeah, I started to focus or specifically on basketball at that point. But yeah, it was always the number one love for sure.
So you obviously had a pretty like decorated high school career. I'd love to hear you talk about that a little bit into detail. State championships, that kind of stuff, and what that was like, and then also kind of touch on like what was AAU like? How are you being recruited? You played at a little bit of a smaller high school for what we have here in Oregon, but dudes could still play at that level. So can you kind of talk
Hmm.
about all of that together?
Yeah, so sixth, seventh grade, I actually, just to start off with my injury history, I had a stress fracture in my L5 in my back. So I missed off and on about a year of any type of physical activity. So eighth grade, before going into high school, I got plugged into uh, AAU training program up in Portland called Clutch Players, ran by Jason Fawcett, Jeremy Nesbitt. And if you're up in the Portland area, I would highly recommend getting plugged into them. But I got plugged in with Jason because one of my friends who had been training with him, but he had trained Kevin Love in high school, which that was because I was a big, like going into high school, I was 6'5". My dad was 6'10", so I thought potential me being that tall as well. So I was actually big until my sophomore year of high school. But yeah, he trained Kevin. He had some opportunities to go coach in the NBA, but he turned that down because he just wanted to train young athletes. So I got very, very lucky and fortunate to get plugged in there. I remember, Josh, you mentioned on an episode where you kind of got out or not getting out of Oregon too much and seeing some high level talent. Like my first experience of that was we went down to LA for a AU tournament going into high school and we played LA pump and run. Like I didn't know dudes at that age could dunk, and so they full court pressed us the whole game. Got beat by 40, right? So I think it was my first experience of, all right, I might not be as good as I thought that I was, and I really need to like get better. So I went to coming out of eighth grade, deciding where I wanted to go to high school, and the main reason was basketball. I lived in Westland, but at the time, Westland didn't have a very solid basketball program up until that point. Peyton came in my senior year. I almost transferred my senior year to go there, but they didn't get good until my senior year. So coming out, they had a coach who had just moved up a couple years previously from California who'd won, I don't know, at that point, 600 games down in the Los Angeles, Orange County area. So he was very well respected, and I trusted him and just his ability to develop me. And then there was a player at Horizon who a lot of people ask me about, Jordan Tebbett, which at one point he was a top 20 player in the country, was being recruited by, probably had offers from every Pac-12 school. He had offers from Kansas. He had Kentucky recruiting him. I mean, every school was recruiting this guy. And so for me, I thought it was a great situation. I'd grown up in Christian schools. I liked the small school atmosphere, but also I knew from a basketball perspective, it was probably the best opportunity for me to develop, to get seen by coaches, being around Jordan, have a great coach. And so I ended up going to Horizon. I came in, I eventually ended up starting on that team, and that was the first time we won the state championship. And so in the state championship, it was pretty cool. They didn't guard me; they were trying to guard Jordan, so I made the first three threes of the game, which was pretty electric to do that in the state championship. But I kind of established, myself at that level, and periodically, obviously playing in the AU circuit during the springs and summers. It's interesting, my journey as a player. I didn't really understand the growth and development side of things and the work it took to become a great player, one that can play at the collegiate level, one can play at the professional level. I just didn't really understand. I thought you either had it or you didn't, and it didn't really click for me. And so I had talent. Like I was 6'5", I could shoot the ball. I had jump hook over each shoulder, but one, I didn't keep growing, so I was 6'5", and I'm not going to play. I didn't have the athleticism to play big at the next level. Um, and so slowly after my freshman year, my AU coach just told me, "Hey, you're going to be a wing from now on." It's funny because I really had no idea what it meant to be on the wing. Like I remember going out there and it felt like a foreign world. All I knew was shoot a three, maybe drive straight to the basket, and then jump hook around the hoop. All I had was a post game, and so that was an interesting transition. But luckily, I was plugged into the right situation to learn how to develop that. But from an AU perspective, I think at that point, it's really interesting. You can't separate like the beliefs you have about yourself and like your output. Like you always act out who you believe you are. So for me, I was really scared of failure. So I think part of me was scared to fully jump into basketball because like if I didn't really try and then like if I didn't
Mm.
make it, like, oh, I didn't really try, so I didn't end up failing. And so I didn't really train super hard. I was more lackadaisical in kind of all areas of your life. Like how you do one thing's how you do everything. So the schoolroom, I was smart, but I didn't really, you know, apply myself. Same thing with basketball. So that summer, um, did all right AAU wise. I don't remember too much about my sophomore year or going into my sophomore year. And then sophomore year, we won state again. Was playing the wing, beat our rival again in the state championship pretty handily. We played in the Les Schwab that year, which was really cool. We had a shot to beat Central Catholic, but the chips didn't fall our way. Um, but I would say the biggest change in my high school and just my basketball career, and actually as a person, just from the light the light switch flipping on, was that summer. So that would have been going into my junior year. Like we played in all the big tournaments. So we were going to Indiana, we were going to Arkansas, we were going to Vegas, we were going all over the place and playing in all these tournaments. And so we went to Vegas going into my junior year that summer, and we played that summer. We actually played against Marcus Smart's team, which is pretty crazy. Like that guy, he's the exact same player. So, and he was an underdog. So they have super pools in Vegas. So there's certain pools where all these teams advance into the championship bracket, and his team didn't. They weren't put in a super pool. So it was him. They had Phil Forte, who played at Oklahoma State, the
Mm.
little white shooter who was
Yeah.
unbelievable shooter. They had a guy that went to New Mexico, 6'8", lengthy, athletic dude. Um, but outside of that, I don't remember them having extraordinary talent. They ended up winning the Vegas tournament that year, went into the championship bracket, and won the tournament, which is pretty awesome. But that was my first experience of playing in front of a lot of coaches, like a ton of coaches. I remember there's probably 100 coaches there, high D1 level. I remember seeing Roy Williams sit in front row. I'm like, this is crazy, man, you know. But I think again, I didn't know how to get out of my own head in those circumstances. Like I went out and I played all right. I didn't play great. I was scared to mess up. If I had an open shot, what if I don't make this? Like, so I didn't play super well, which is unfortunate. But I remember we played a team, Dallas Mustangs, in the consolation bracket, and after that after that game, our AU coach talked to one of the assistants at Oklahoma State, and they said, and we had Calvin Hermanson on our team, which went down and played at St. Mary's, played at Lake Oswego, was he was Gatorade Player of the Year twice in Oregon. He's a stud. He was all conference down at St. Mary's a couple years. But they said to my coach, we really like Calvin, we really like Michael, but we want to see how he develops physically. Because at the time I wasn't in great shape, still had a little bit of baby fat, and so they wanted to see how I would develop at that point. And so my coach told me that, and I don't know, something flipped in my head where I just got crazy obsessive about, I don't know, just the training element of things, my diet, probably too much so, where I tried to count every single calorie, probably ate unhealthy, from just nutrition standpoint. But I don't know, the flip switch, and I just realized, the work that it took to be good. And so I went from being, kind of a chubby kid to, incredible shape. And so feel free to stop me if you have any questions. I'm kind of talking, but, I was incredibly blessed. Again, what I mentioned, playing and training at Clutch. Obviously, Jason and Jeremy were phenomenal in how they taught us the game, right? So the fundamentals, everything from drive and kick to replace. Just like how to play the game at the next level, where I think a lot of people nowadays, you see so much skill work, right? So all these guys can go out and do a in and out cross. They have a hezzy, but you put them in a 5-on-5 game and they don't really know what to do. you
Hmm.
know. And so we were luckily, and the thing is, he held us to a very very high standard. Um, where I wanted to be told I was special and I was great, and he wasn't necessarily going to do that, but he told it how it was, and held us to a high standard. But luckily I was able to train against some pretty incredible players in Oregon. Every day I was playing against Kyle Wiltshire, and the Tarver brothers from Oregon State would come through pretty consistently. And there's a lot of guys that were, had to guard Martell Webster one summer as he was training to get back to the league, which you don't realize how good these guys in the NBA are. Like, they're phenomenal, trying to guard him, and just like his ability to use his body, pump fakes, pivot, is kind of eye opening. But, I got to train every single day against really good players, right? And push myself, but I just realized the work that it really takes, and how much you have to simplify your life around a certain goal, and kind of cut out the rest to become what you want to accomplish. And so going into that year, I thought and was told that I was probably playing the best out of everyone that we had that fall at Clutch. And then the first week, of high school, I rolled my ankle super bad, right? So I put in all this work, I made all this progress, was playing really well, and I roll my ankle. Try to come back a week later, I'm standing at the free throw line guarding someone take a step, just standing there, roll it again with an ankle brace on, like a heavy duty ankle brace. I'm like, oh my gosh, man. And so I was out for 6 weeks, slept with my foot elevated the whole year. Um, got back, near the end, we lost in the state championship. But, again, it was kind of that story where I'd make a ton of progress, get injured, right? And it was really frustrating. But that was kind of my journey up until my junior year. So I don't know if you had any questions about all that. I kind of
What
just went.
when did recruiting start for you, and what exactly did that look like?
Yeah, so I think going back, if I were to give myself some advice, was like, drop the pride. I think it was, at the time, early on in high school, was high Division 1 or bust, right? That's what I had my sights set on. And so I don't want to say I was disrespectful to smaller schools, but I didn't really give them too much attention, which, it is what it is. I'm 15 years old. But I think, my recruiting started freshman year because I had Jordan, right? So Oregon State was at our practices all the time. Lorenzo Romar was coming down all the time from UW to watch. So I think they saw a kid that was 6'5", 6'6", potential to grow, could shoot it, could even have a sky hook. So I started to, I don't want to say they were recruiting me, but they were definitely interested at that point, and just to kind of seeing where I would end up, and what would happen to my development. And then I don't know when exactly. I think it's junior year. Like, you can get letters up until that point, I believe. I don't know if things have changed, but I think there's a certain age where they can finally text you or call you, and things like that. I think it was maybe junior year. And that's where I started to get, there was some mid majors, that were interested in me, especially my junior year, that were giving me a fair amount of attention. I'd get the random, maybe a handwritten letter from USC or something like that, but it wasn't anything extensive. But yeah, I would say early on in high school, because of who I was surrounded by with Jordan. And then, as I continued to put myself, and that's the power of AAU, right? Is, you have to be seen by coaches in order for them to recruit you. I think regardless of how good you are at the high school level, and obviously, if you're special, you're going to separate yourself. There's the Zion Williamsons, there's the top talents. But again, those guys are at schools where they're being seen, or they're on the AAU circuit. So, luckily I was just out there playing, and, as I'm out there playing, coaches see you, and they start showing some interest.
Yeah. Really quick to finish up your high school career. So you went through your junior year, lost the state championship. Can you talk a little bit about your senior year and what that was like?
Yeah, so again, coming off that ankle injury, started going to AAU, and that's the last kind of hurrahs going into your senior year AAU. And so that spring, again, I was probably our most consistent player. I was playing really well. There's a couple schools, some mid majors, that were really, really interested in me, and they just wanted to eventually see me on the summer circuit. And I think one of them was for sure probably going to offer. Some others that were interested But like late May, for whatever reason, I just started getting back spasms. I don't really know why. I think training is a very well-rounded and all-inclusive endeavor where I think at that time I was spending a lot of time in the weight room on the court, but I was neglecting other areas like stretching or, making sure I was balanced in that regard. And so my hips were super tight. I had all these imbalances. So I think just overtraining, I ended up having back spasms I couldn't play from May till late June, and you start playing in July. And so I had a couple practices back, and then my first time playing on the July AU circuit, I hadn't really been playing. And so, I think at that point I didn't have a ton of confidence in my game. I remember we're playing up in Bellevue, and that's coaches are there. I didn't play well at that tournament. I started to turn it around at the end of that AAU season in Vegas. I had some decent games, but it wasn't what I was playing like in the spring, which is unfortunate. I don't know if I was supposed to have let coaches know going into it what the situation was, but I didn't want to be making excuses. And so I think, the assistant coaches can love you, and then the head coach sees you and, you're not playing as well and there's no communication. I don't know. I don't know if that hurt me or not. Obviously, it wasn't in the cards, but, I didn't end up having the best AAU season, which was unfortunate. There was still some schools that were interested. Air Force actually offered me in the fall of that year, but they wanted a commitment in the fall, and I wasn't ready to commit to everything that is required to go play at Air Force, especially as a 17, 18-year-old kid. And so at that point, I was in a very unique situation where I'd kind of neglected the smaller schools to a degree, and so I wouldn't have kept following up with me. So I was kind of in this weird middle ground where I think the smaller schools thought I was going to play at a higher level. Obviously the higher level schools, I think, had lost some interest just due to that summer, and just I didn't end up playing well for a variety of reasons. But obviously, being hurt and trying to come back from that all the time just kind of messes with your head. And so, in my senior year, was kind of my last shot to go prove myself. And so we lost in the state championship my junior year to our rival, and I had so much pride in high school for my school and just what we had established that I was obsessed again about winning that state championship. And so that whole year, I made sure I got 9 hours of sleep a night. Like everything were surrounded basketball, every life decision. And so, I think I was second in state at all levels in scoring my senior year. And a lot of that, honestly, we'd blow teams out at the 3A level, and I would just sit for the final quarter. So Alex Roth ended up getting it from, I think he was somewhere in Salem.
West
I
Salem.
wish I wish I would have gotten that. Yeah, but it is what it is. And then we kind of steamrolled our way to um, the state the state championship that year. But um, yeah, I think it was still kind of frustrating because again, I was in that weird position when it came to recruiting. And so there was a couple NAIA Division One schools that had offered me. And I think my biggest thing was I was incredibly appreciative of what my parents had done for me and sacrificed for me to be put in positions to develop my game, to train the way I needed to have me go to all these tournaments. Like that's not talked about enough. I think some people at the higher levels they're sponsored, but at lower levels, like the parents are paying for a lot of this stuff for the most part, or you're fundraising. And so I think one of my biggest things is I didn't want my dad to have to pay for me to go to school, regardless. Like there was a school which I loved the coaching staff. Like I never saw myself going playing at the Division 3 level, but the coaching staff up at Whitman in Walla Walla. Like they showed me so much love, and they showed me how we can make you a professional basketball player. And they just sent all these guys to go play professionally. But again, it was $50,000 to go to school. I wasn't that good of a student to get scholarship money because they're a top 25 school in the country academically, and so that was unfortunate. So I was in a position where I had some D2 schools coming out, and some NAI schools. So that's kind of where I was at from a recruiting standpoint, trying to make my decision.
So obviously, you finish up your high school career, you end up at NNU, right? So
Mm-hmm.
can you talk about um, how that kind of happened? Obviously, recruiting was a little bit all over the place depending on how
Mm-hmm.
you were playing, who was talking to you, different levels. That's something I think a lot of recruits maybe don't get to experience is being recruited by multiple levels.
Mm-hmm.
Being at an NAI, playing at the level that us three played at, we can get we get players that have played at multiple different levels, whether that's JUCO, they transfer in from a D1 or straight out of high school, right? So, can you talk about how you ended up at NNU and why that was a good fit for you at the time and all that?
Yeah, honestly, looking back, I couldn't tell you why I chose NNU. I thought maybe it was a God thing. But one thing that I've had to grow in just in life as a basketball player, as a employee is really focusing in on the details and why you're going to make the decisions that you make. Because I mean, these decisions are big decisions. I just want to go play basketball somewhere, be on scholarship, have the opportunity to play at a good level and then go play professionally. But there's a lot of decisions that can set you up for that and push you one direction or push you in a different direction. And so, I went on my visit. For me, my faith was really important to me at the time and making a decision. And so I liked the coach's faith. It was a Christian school. That's really all I had been to. So I think maybe subconsciously I wanted to be in that environment. And so I went on my visit, and honestly, like looking back, I wish I would have asked better questions for what would be the right fit for me. And I think at that age you're scared to ask challenging questions or ask the hard questions, especially on your visit, maybe to other players you're staying with to get the full, situation. But, I don't think I did my due diligence of understanding of did I want to be in Nampa, Idaho? Like, did I want to spend a whole year there? Academically, is this where I wanted to be? Environment wise, school wise, and then from a team perspective, what is the atmosphere truly like? Like, what is the coach like? How does he motivate? What's the morale like? Where are things going? What's the past history been? Do guys enjoy playing? Like, there's a lot of questions that I wish I would have. And not that I would change anything, but I think looking back, I would be very, very diligent about the program, the coach. Is this the type of coach that I want to play for? Because there's different coaching styles, and well, what's best for you and what do you like, right? And so I don't know. I'm happy I went there. I think it was all part of the story and the plan. But I'm not fully sure why I committed there, to be completely honest with you, looking back. But it just kind of felt right at the time, and I made that decision. So I went in, freshman year, and I actually was in a position they wanted me to redshirt, and so we start practice, we start open gyms, and what kind of changed for me was we did an inter squad scrimmage where I scored, I think, 20 points in that game and played pretty well. And then we went and played College of Southern Idaho, which is a top JUCO, and I had, I don't know, 20 points against them, 5 rebounds, as at the time a red shirt. And so after that, the coaching staff took me out to eat, and they're like, you know what, we're going to take you off a red shirt. You're starting. I'm like, that's kind of a crazy swing. And so it's interesting going from the high school level to the collegiate level, how I had to adopt my game. In high school, I was pretty ISO heavy. I could score at all three levels, but the athleticism at the collegiate level was significantly higher. The strength was significantly higher. I couldn't body people or do that anymore. And so it took some adjustment. I more so turned into a spot up shooter to start. And then I learned how to really be efficient in scoring, right? One dribble pull up, straight line drives, not wasting my dribbles. So there was a development in that. And then defensively, we came in, there's different focuses to start every college season, but it was, you couldn't put your hands on anyone. In high school, you could actually kind of do it a little more surprisingly. And so I fouled out of how many games. So I had to learn how to defend, how to use my body, how to use angles. So I'm not incredibly laterally quick. But I ended up playing pretty well. I didn't know freshman of the year was even an award until we went and played at Seattle Pacific, which they're a top Division II program, especially in the GNAC, but consistently in the country. And I don't know, I think I had 20 points or something after the game. My coach said, that was a great statement for freshman of the year. And I didn't even know that was a thing. It was actually crazy. Up until that point, I actually wanted to quit. So I just didn't like the environment. I think I was challenged before I was ready to be challenged. It was an environment that wasn't incredibly together. Guys weren't excited to play basketball for a lot of different reasons. So it's kind of a, to a degree, unhealthy environment. And so I actually wanted to redshirt. My dad had to fly out to talk me out of quitting the team because I wanted to quit
Hmm.
and then maybe go train for a year, work, and then go to a JUCO and try to find my way to a Division 1 or to a different school. My dad, ended up talking me out of that, which is a blessing, to have someone to do that, to tell me to stick it through, right? Because I committed, I'm not going to quit. And so, but yeah, I was ready to bounce, honestly. The whole year I knew I was going to transfer at the end of the year. And so it was kind of made a splash when the freshman of the year transferred from the school. There was kind of some drama around that a little bit, but I just wanted to get out of there. And so I just wanted to be in a different environment to play. So I left.
Hmm. When did NCU get on your map, and what kind of led to that that all come into fruition?
It's just so funny how a story unfolds where my going into my senior year, we actually went and played down at NCU for, I don't know, like kind of an exhibition game against another Christian school. Played really well, and so Corey Anderson was the coach at the time, and so he came and talked to me and Calvin Anderson, who ended up going there as well, who was my high school teammate. And me and Calvin were kind of joking, like we're never gonna end up at NCU, like I don't know what it was, I just there was pride, a little bit on that, but I never saw myself at NCU. And then late in my high school career, Luke ended up becoming the coach. And so Calvin was in a position where he was trying to figure out where he wanted to go, didn't have anything set. He ended up going to NCU, which was, interesting to me. That's one of my best friends. And so that was a draw to a degree. But it was late in my recruiting process. I was really, Luke would send me pictures of him with Michael Jordan, and there was some similarities between me and Luke and how we played.
Mhm.
Obviously, he was a lot better than I was, but there were some similarities, and I knew he had connections, and so that was intriguing to me. But again, it was pretty late in my process, so I knew late, once I first got to NNU that I wasn't happy, and honestly, I kind of lost my love for the game. I wanted to be closer to home. I needed some normalcy to a degree, and so I just thought, I could go somewhere, play well, play for someone that is like me who had connections and go play professionally, be close to home. I love the idea of being on Oregon's campus, but also in a small school. So I honestly didn't look anywhere else. I probably could have, given the year that I had my freshman year, but honestly, I just said I'm going to NCU. I want to play for Luke and made that decision.
Um, yeah, Mike, can you kind of talk about like your redshirt experience at NCU? What, caused all that? Me and you came in the same season,
Yeah.
and finished our careers there together. Um, and so I know Josh knows too. You went through a lot,
Mhm.
honestly, in your college career, and it's a pretty cool story considering how your career ended up and some of the records that you hold through that time. So, can you talk about what happened a little bit in the
Mhm.
struggle, and then what came out of it?
Yeah, so when I transferred going into my sophomore year, coming off freshman of the year, I think one, I had lost my love of the game a bit. It was the first time I really didn't enjoy basketball, and it didn't fulfill something within inside of me that I think I was looking for. And so, not that I didn't train that summer, but I don't think I trained as hard. And I think I thought I'd go in and just kind of play at NCU, in all honesty. And so I came in, was originally on the starting unit, and I actually went through some tough things off the court that played into a lot of it. You just kind of go through life and you just keep going. You don't really realize how life experiences affect you. Things off the court can affect you on the court. And so I went through some tough things personally where I had to step away from the team for a few days and all that. So I think that affected it as well. But also I think where I always prided myself on the work, I don't think I came prepared that next year, at NCU, my first year there. And so eventually I kind of fell out of the rotation. I wasn't playing. I was trying to get back on the court. I couldn't figure out. I was trying everything, right? I was trying to play angry. I was trying to play free. I was trying to play happy. I just couldn't get my game right. And one of the biggest things is, rest in peace, Coach Litz, incredible human being, but he changed my shot and tried to change it, my form, how I held the ball, all these things like right before we started playing games. And so I'm in my head about all that, mess with my shot. And so it was kind of a perfect storm of, I don't know, I just fell out of the rotation, and all that, and pretty mad and angry, realizing, and I made a commitment to myself that wasn't going to happen again. I was going to put in, kind of get back to where I was in high school. Of I was going to put in an absurd amount of work. I'm going to outwork everyone. I love the off season because if you give me and someone else, whether it was hate to say it, a teammate or a competitor, you gave us the same amount of time, I believed I was going to get and put in more work to get better than they were. And so I love that idea. And so I started off that spring, was kind of on a mission. I was probably working out 3 or 4 hours a day, stretching a lot. I was trying to make sure everything was right. I kind of had a chip on my shoulder in open gyms. I was trying to go at dudes, guys that were playing ahead of me. I was trying to show them I was better than them. And so I was playing really well and happy with where my game was at. But we went back for summer. I think it was summertime. And my hips started getting tighter and tighter, kind of my groin area. And so I'd been lifting a lot. And so I thought that's probably what it is. I'd had dealt with injuries and tightness and things. And so I was trying to be careful of that. And then one day, it gotten progressively tighter, and I had to sprint in a game, sprint after something. I felt like I pulled my groin. And so, I take a week off, come back, and it progressively was getting worse. And when I was playing, it got to a point I felt like I was dragging my leg as I'm playing. And so my dad was a doctor, and he got me plugged in to go see and get evaluated from a specialist, a hip specialist. And he kind of was doing some movements with it, checking out my hip, and was getting confirmation, asking questions, kind of nodding his head, thinking that's kind of weird. And so he goes, "You know what? I think you tore your labrum." And I don't really have a context for the labrum and the hip. I didn't even know that was a thing. And so I just asked him, "How long till I'm back?" Um, and he goes, "Probably 6 months to a year." And that shook me, honestly, because
Hmm.
again, was putting in all this work, was playing really well. I was back to myself to a degree. And again, this happens. But 6 months to a year, I'd never dealt with that. Like, that was such a significant blow to a timeline that really threw me off. And so I remember driving home, I was sitting in traffic, so I wasn't moving. I was texting my buddy, just crying, like, because I was so devastated because of what had happened and what that meant. And so, I remember talking to the surgeon, before the surgery, and he goes, "Honestly," he's like, "I would highly recommend you not coming back and playing basketball." And it's interesting. I think it's the power of a goal and maybe stubbornness, but I always wanted to play professional basketball. That's what I wanted to do my whole life. And so because there was really no other option, I didn't know what else I was going to do with my life until that point. My goal was to, try to make money playing professionally and then use that money and start a business and go that route. So it was my plan. And so, and plus I didn't want to leave my career where it was, like being on the bench, not playing. Like, I just couldn't allow that to happen and have that sit with me. And so, I was like, all right, like, this is just something. I cried for a bit. I was sad, but there's an author who wrote this in his book, M. Scott Peck and the Road Less Traveled, I think is the book it's from. He says, "True mental health is dedication to reality at all costs."
Hmm.
Right? Like, it was something that happened, and I easily could have gotten salty and bitter and sad and woe is me, those type of things. But in all reality, I needed the surgery and I was hurt, and so I couldn't fight that. And so my next step was, okay, how can I be perfect in my recovery, right? So,
Hmm.
if he says it's hard to come back from this, like, you've seen Isaiah Thomas had the same injury. Like, it was really hard for him to go through that, and he still hasn't been able to get back. But I was like, all right, if I can be perfect in my recovery, like they said, never put your foot down on the ground. I'm like, I'm not putting my foot down on the ground. Like, I'm just not going to do it. I was on crutches for 6 weeks. You have to learn how to re-walk. And so I found out later that he's like, "Yeah, dude, people try to start walking after 2 weeks." I'm like, "What?" Like, I thought I ruined my hip when I, like, stumbled and put my foot down on the ground, but it was, again, it was reshaping and refocusing on another goal, and that was to get back on the basketball court. And so I was just obsessive about doing everything that I could. I stepped back from the game, a little bit. Luckily, I could kind of do that at NCU, where it was a good time away to kind of reevaluate why last year happened the way that it did. Kind of get my love back when something's taken away. When you're always doing it, like, I think that's part of, I don't want to say an issue, but it's just reality where you play it year round all the time. You kind of take it for granted. I think you probably know this, Josh,
For
like,
sure.
when it gets taken away and you realize, oh man, I really do love this thing, like I truly, genuinely love playing basketball, and so I just, one, was focused incredibly on getting my hip healthy. I like being active, so I wanted that for the rest of my life, but also it was an incredible time to lower my pride and humble myself and start asking questions of, what is coach really looking
Hmm.
for? Why are these guys playing on the court? I'm more talented than them, I believed, but they're playing. And so that whole year,
Hmm.
I paid a lot more attention to those small details. Like, I'm incredibly grateful for people like Nick Sullivan, people like Jay Mayernick, Travis Pecos, and no one probably knows those names, unless you're in the NCU. They're not Michael Jordan and those type of names, but for me, like, they were so crucial to eventually where my career ended up, because I started to see why they played. Like, they showed up every single day and they worked hard. They did the little things. They didn't really care if they scored. To me, I was a scorer up until that point. And that's all that mattered. Like, if I scored, I did well. If I didn't, I would probably have rather have played well and lost than not played well and won. Like, that's just who I was and who I'd been up until that point, because I thought that's what I needed to be successful. And so I'm watching these guys, okay, Jay rebounds the heck out of the ball, right? And so I made a dedication to myself when I came back, like, I'm going to be a great rebounder. I'd never been a rebounder up until that point in my career, even, being 6'5", 6'6". It was kind of a joke, in high school. I was going to be a great rebounder, so I just tried to learn as many lessons as I possibly could, watching these guys and asking questions and humbling myself and kind of looking in the mirror and realizing that there was a reason I wasn't playing. And so that was huge for me to have that time to step away and to really learn, and just communicate with people, to realize what I had to grow in. And then I came back, I left the spring and went home for that summer. That's kind of as I started to get cleared to do more and more things. And so I was training up in Portland, and my goal was just to show up in crazy shape, and I didn't want to say much. I think Luke texted me maybe once that summer, and Luke later on said, I didn't think Michael could potentially come back from this. I think a lot of people might have thought that. I might have been one of the only people that maybe did. I don't know. I didn't know. No one said anything, but I got in incredible shape that summer, just cardiovascularly. I was, it was about a year till I got back on the court and started playing, but I was starting to play well, and so I came in. I didn't want to say anything. I just kind of wanted to show up and play really well. And so I think this was your freshman year, right, Josh?
Yeah. Yep.
So we were stacked. I don't know if you guys have talked about in other podcasts, but like, there's some incredible talent at the NAI level, and we had the
Oh yeah.
talent to win the national championship. We had, Kyler Kelly, who was, he led the Pac-12 in blocks, I believe. We
Yeah.
had
He's in
D1
London
dropped.
right now.
Yeah, he's in London playing. We had Brendan, who's been on the podcast, who'd been at USC and
Hmm.
Santa Clara. Like, we had a lot of guys. Jack was a walk-on at University of Hawaii, and we had a lot of guys, man, that could really play. And so that fall was really fun, playing, and honestly, I was playing really, really well. We had some dudes out, but I ended up starting the first two games, kind of coming back, which felt good. And then on the Saturday game, I think it was against Northwest Indian, someone banged into my leg, my hip kind of shot in, and I felt that same pain that I thought I had with my torn labrum.
Hmm.
And so at that point, honestly, I texted my mom. I said, Mom, if my hip's torn, I want to leave. I want to study abroad. Like, I'm done. Like, I was like, if I tore this again, I can't come back from this again. And so I had to go through that whole process of seeing, what was up with my hip. And turns out it was just like a strain of a bunch of ligaments in my hip. So luckily, but I was out for, I don't know, a couple months, probably having to rehab again. Came back and tried to find my way back into the lineup. But, when you don't have the ability to put in the reps and get shots up and play game
Yeah.
speed and you're thrown into games, like I never really found my rhythm. I had, there's a couple games where I played well, but is few and far between. But it was fun again. Was before, if I wasn't scoring, like I really wasn't too much of a benefit to my team. And so that was probably my first experience of putting into practice what I'd learned when I was hurt of, I'm gonna go in there, I'm gonna try to make the extra pass, I'm a rebound. I think my rebounding per minute average was significantly higher than what it was. So I found ways to impact the game, and we won the conference and we went to the state tournament. I started playing a little, or not state tournament, the national tournament, and ended up playing some good minutes there. But yeah, it was a long journey back for sure to get back to even playing on the basketball court, and it wasn't given at all.
For sure. um, it's kind of crazy. Like obviously you had talked about that obsessiveness to come back from like such a crazy injury that not a lot of people can, and if they do, like obviously not the same athlete as before, not the same player as before. Um, you talked about that obsessiveness, and I got to see that like coming in my freshman year. So I've talked about this on the pod a little bit. I didn't have a ton of um, major exposure before I got to the college level, and it was a really big jump from high school to college. Just
Mm-hmm.
truthfully, just wasn't. I hadn't had much of that in between, and so just like the amount of work that you put in, even on like the elliptical, like I have like this burned image in my brain of you just going crazy on that elliptical, just being like, dude, this guy's insane. Like he's going so hard, and like just that type of stuff where like to have multiple injuries like that, like, even with just like the three or four other guys that we've had on the pod, like they've all talked about injuries happening, something happening where there's this moment of like, do I quit or do I lean all the way
Mm-hmm.
in? And like for for me to kind of see firsthand, like you leaning all the way back in it was incredible. It was awesome.
Yeah, it's like,
Um,
what other choice do you have, right? Like
for
things
sure,
happen in life, and it's like I can either quit or I can keep going with it. Like I feel like the only chance I had was to keep going. So
for sure. And
why
it
not?
was for sure. It was incredible. Just even I remember us all getting yelled at because you were like your first or second day back in practice, like you're killing everyone and running lines. It was like Loomis has only been back for one freaking day. Like he's already we were like freaking Loomis, dude, out here making us look bad. He's only been back for one day, but we know that
Yeah,
you've been
man.
in better shape than all of us for the last 2 weeks on that elliptical.
Yeah, man.
So it's pretty incredible.
And one thing I did want to touch on real quick was, Kobe Bryant was someone I looked up to significantly. Like I love that, you talk about the Mamba mentality. I listened to so many interviews that he did. And I think and rightfully so, we glorified the work that he put in 6 hours a day, 6 days a week for 6 months, right? Like that was kind of
Mhm.
his thing, the 666 workout. And I tried to replicate that. And I think one of the hardest lessons I've had to learn, even post playing, was like, I'm not Kobe Bryant. I don't have his athletic ability, his efficiency muscularly. So, I had to learn, and I didn't really fully learn it while playing, and I didn't really fully learn it while rehabbing, but like we have limits, especially as athletes, right? And so even resting
Right.
and learning when it is to step back a little bit, is super important. And so that's one thing I would recommend people as, if they are coming back from injury or they're dealing with that, like I would ask the right questions, get around the right people, and realize like how much is enough, and don't go over that. I think we glorify that a lot of times, and some people do it, but at the end of the day, I think a lot of my recurrent injuries were because of that. So it's a valuable lesson to learn.
Yeah, it's important.
Hmm.
Not to be mixed with you not working hard enough and thinking that you need a rest day. there's a there's a fine line there,
There's a fine line,
um,
yeah, and yeah, it's different for everyone.
for sure. So you talked a little bit about just like the different guys that you got to learn from in your redshirt season. Guys like Jay, who's an absolute legend,
Hmm.
um, and talk about rebounding, talk about finding different ways to contribute. Um, I'm just really quick. I'm just going to rattle off some numbers about your senior year because I was just doing a little deep dive on you, and just like it's unbelievable. So first of all, just averages for senior, you're 49% from the field, 40% from three, 88% from the free throw line, average 22 and 10 your senior year, and not to mention a few games like one of the most legendary performances I've ever seen wasn't even your highest scoring game where you had
Mhm.
36 and 22 against OIT in that overtime game.
Mhm.
Hit that three from the wing
Mhm.
in OT, and then obviously your Multnomah game where you put up 48 and 18, which is just unreal. Like we had talked about this a few
Yeah.
episodes ago. Just like if you can hoop on any level, like you can hoop, obviously. So like
Yeah.
no matter the level, if you're putting up 48 and 18, that's pretty special.
Yeah, man.
Can you just talk a little bit about some of those types of performances and just like walk us through that? Because like even for some people who played at a really high level, bro, putting up 48 is putting up 48. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah, I think it was interesting coming into that year again. I was hurt for probably the first 2 months. Like, I actually kind of re-aggravated my hip again, and so I kind of had a
Mm-hmm.
late start. And so again, and you hear a lot of athletes talk about this. I think it's becoming more common, but this idea of flow, this idea of being in the moment, this idea of not overthinking, not getting too high, too low. I think up until that point, I'd let my emotions get the best of me. I was thinking about too many things while I was playing, what I just messed up with or potential upcoming plays that I was just always kind of stressed and overthinking. And so I think my senior year, I finally, I don't know, I just kind of said, screw it. We were having a hard time, kind of re-putting together our team and our culture after we lost some pretty crucial guys. We didn't start off as well. We took some bad losses, and I think knowing it was my last year and I just I just went out and honestly played. Like, I was just uber aggressive. Um, I think I played within myself, knowing I was a shooter. I learned it progressively during that year, but like playing to my strengths, playing, scoring at all three levels. But I think at the end of the day, man, it's just like even that Multnomah game where I scored 48 points, I almost didn't play that night because I don't know what happened the night before against Warner Pacific, but my knee was really hurting. If you watch the the first half, I was kind of limping up and down the court. Like I just but I needed to play, and so even though I wasn't gonna play, like, we came out flat. We took some bad losses. We lost to Evergreen at home that year, which was
Mm-hmm.
devastating to me. And so I could tell we didn't have it as a team. And so I don't know, man. Like, you just kind of got to ask yourself, like, what does it need to win, right? Being the leader of the team. I was just aggressive. And I think that's the beauty of expectation and culture that's been created, and expectations where I expected to go to the national tournament, right? And so going into that weekend where I was National Player of the Week when I had the 36 and the 22 against OIT, that was a big weekend for us. And I knew we needed to get that because I think if we didn't get over those hump, we wouldn't even had a shot at going to the national tournament. And
Yeah.
so I don't know. I was in the moment. I was aggressive. I tried to just do what I could to win the game. I don't know. I just played my game, I think, freely without worrying about the consequences of missing shots and all that. And it just kind of led to what happened that year, which was a lot of fun.
Yeah. It was a pretty special year for sure. So kind of transitioning a little bit after your playing days, looking back, like injuries is especially like when you look at the NBA now, so much of who gets to the finals is just who stays
Mm-hmm.
healthy.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate it's that way. Um, it sucks when you have to look at a series and just say, if that guy was healthy, like how different would it have been?
Yeah.
So like injuries are always a big conversation in really any sport, but now that we're obviously um, all the way deep into a basketball conversation, what are some things looking back, like either like before you had started getting injuries that you might have thought about doing differently, like taking care of your body, nutrition? I know it's obviously really big in your story as well, but is there anything before you got injured like you wish, man, if I could go back and like prepare myself differently, what would I do?
That's a really, really good question. So I think about that a lot. I think if I knew what I know now when I was playing, I would have been a significantly better teammate. Even just from a leadership perspective, like, we went through a lot of hard times my senior year, and there was just a lot of internal conflict. And like,
Yeah.
there's the old adage where people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I think as a leader that year, when things went wrong, I distanced myself, and I look back and I think about like the power of relational integrity, relational equity of, taking a guy out to eat who's having a hard time, like, hey, let's go kick it, or getting all the guys together and like, let's go watch this game. Like, when I look back on that, of having hard conversations, I wish I would have done a better job of like leaning into conflict, instead of like, you guys should figure this out. Like, no one wants to follow that guy ultimately, and I think I could have done a better job helping
Mm.
with a lot of the internal conflict that we had. But, I think one thing that I touched on a little bit when I, was idolizing Kobe and his work ethic is just realizing and understanding your body. I think I had different deficiencies, right? Like, obviously I had a lot of injuries. I think there was at times I overtrained. So really understanding, and nowadays there's so many different tools out there that you can utilize to know where you're at from just an overtraining perspective. Like, I was talking, I work for a supplement company, and I meet with a lot of top integrative doctors across the country. And there was one doctor who was a sports integrative um, doctor, and she was telling me a story about a provider who was working with a lot of NBA guys. She didn't tell me the name of the athlete, but there's this thing called heart rate variability where you can kind of check where you're at in your training. You can start to see when your body's starting to decline, when you're potentially putting yourself at more risk for an injury. And so the
Mhm.
doctor talked about how she was telling him, look, this guy's heart rate variability is going down. He's either going to you need to take some rest now, or he's going to have to get forced to rest. They said no. He ended up tearing his ACL, and he was out for 6-7 months. So there's a lot of tools like heart rate variability. You can just see, hey, I need to take a rest day today. Like, there's people that need to work harder, but there are some people that need to learn how to train smarter.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of things, I said how you do one thing is how you do everything. So success isn't always, a lot of times, addition. A lot of times it's subtraction, and it's simplifying your life around the things that matter. So it's really sitting down and being, okay, one, how good of a player do I want to be? Right? Like, truly asking that question. Because one of the things my grandpa told me, obviously played up until the NBA level, was, there's going to be guys realistically that don't care as much as you. Like, they're not, right? And that's a collection of a team. And so, but I think every player
Mm.
needs to ask that question and then ask themselves, like, am I willing to do what it takes to be great? And that means, everything from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed, like, everything you do shapes you. It's not like you can be one person off the court. Like, there's very few people who can be lackadaisical and not take things as serious and then hop onto the court and perform. Like, that's pretty rare quality that you see like guys in the NBA able to do. You hear stories of Allen Iverson like that, where he just would, but there's not a lot of people like that. So like,
Yeah.
how are you sleeping? Are you getting 8 hours of sleep? One of the biggest things for me, I didn't even know, or sometimes I'd be really fatigued before games. Like, I didn't feel motivated. And so I would, put a lot of shame on myself. Like, oh, I guess I just don't want it enough.
Mm.
Right. But learning, there's this idea of the microbiome in your gut. I just had brain fog, right?
Mm.
Because I was trying to eat healthy. And so, but the thing is, I was drinking like Diet Cokes and, you know, the wrong stuff that I just didn't know. And so I didn't set myself up, to be successful from a nutrition standpoint. Like, are you busy, always on social media and caring what people think? Because at the end of the day, that's going to affect how you play on the court, because you care what people think. And so you're going to
Right.
adjust your game. So there's just so many things, you know, um, that can affect it just from a daily habits perspective. And that's a longer conversation, but I think it's really just taking, like, truly, how good do you want to be? And I think it's finding people. Like, you only have so much time, and you can't learn all these things. So it's really getting people around you, who can help you, who you can ask questions of, who've been there before, who have specialty in this arena and expertise in this arena, and asking questions, right? I don't think I did the best job of doing that. I did it best with what I could, but
Mhm.
there's so many things outside of the basketball court, and even what you believe about yourself. Like, you always act out who you believe you are. So like, what are you constantly thinking about? Like, what do you believe about yourself? Because that's going to affect how you go out on the court. If you don't think you're good enough, just in general life, you're not going to go out and perform very well. So there's just so many things. That's a longer conversation, but I think it's just learning from people who have been successful, and just learning from them. There's so much content out there where you can learn from them. I'm always available. I don't I'm not act like I'm an expert, but I've learned a lot of things about a lot of these things. I could probably walk through someone how to transform their energy in their life and how they feel in their body and lower inflammation in their body, which affects injury and all that type of stuff. So,
Right.
um, yeah, I think it's just being obsessive of growing every single day. Grow 1% every single day. Kind of one of those type of things. But um, hopefully that helped answer the question. I kind of went all over the place, but
Yeah, for sure. I know something that I like to tell people to do is just to document. Like everybody's body's
yeah.
different, and
Hmm.
as far as for me, like uh, looking back, I wish I just would have like just simply written down like what I did that day, like what time I woke up, what did
Yeah.
I eat, how far before the game did I eat, and then like did I feel good? And so like everyone's a
Yeah.
little bit different. Like there's some people who don't eat on game day. Like I would struggle if that was me. So like it's everyone's a little bit different. So just write down like what did you do that day and how did you feel?
Yeah.
That definitely helped me a little bit later in my career. And honestly, it was like right after I'd stopped playing my second year. It was like, why didn't I just like write down like what helped me feel really good that day? Like, why didn't I just do
Yeah.
that? But it's hard to do in the moment because you just might like, I'm just off today, you know. But
Yeah.
yeah, it
No,
can be
there's a reason you're off. If you don't have energy, you don't feel good, like, there's a
yeah,
reason, and it could be a lot of different reasons, everyone's so unique, but pay attention, ask questions of when you feel good and when you don't, because that, like, being obsessive about that 1% to give you that slight edge can help be the difference between winning and losing a game, and it's so important just to care about that stuff.
real quick. I want to ask you. You can feel as comfortable as you would like in this question, but there's obviously like the physical aspect of going through injury rehab. Obviously, sometimes I think even the bigger conversation is the mental part.
Yeah.
Coming back, getting your confidence back, not even just skill wise, but even just like confidence to use your body the way that it can at 100%. Can you talk a little bit
Yeah.
um, about your journey, about things that were helpful for you, maybe some things that you wish you hadn't dealt with, just like the real part of going through rehab and the mental aspect of it. Can you just talk about that for a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, there was times, even though I had a vision very strongly of me coming back to the court, like, I think that's very important, is really holding firm to that vision of you getting back on the court and not really wavering on that, because you can start to doubt for sure, especially in a year-long, 6 months recovery. That's a long time to be alone with yourself, away from the game, not able to do what you wanna do. There was times where I would have pain and I'd wonder if this would ever go away. But I think just when it comes to recovery in and of itself, not even just the psychological, emotional element that plays into, it's kind of a bigger conversation, but I think it's just one, I mean, being diligent about who's helping you in your recovery process. Like, who are the people that you are recovering with from a physical therapy perspective? What are their,
Mm-hmm.
their credentials? What are they telling you, right? Like, being very, like, again, where I wasn't as diligent, I believe, picking a school my first time, being very diligent about that and making sure you're in the right hands, because there's a lot of people out there that has a lot of different things to say about injury, about recovery, right? And
Yeah,
so not everyone who's a professional is really good at what they do. Like, that's in all reality. And so finding the right person, right? And I think if you once you find that right person, is trusting what they have to say. And if you're doing everything that they're having you do, having confidence, that that is enough, and then having that they've set you up for success once you get back onto the court. I think that was one thing which I never had for some reason. I never, once I got out and played, was worrying about my hip or re-injuring it,
mm,
honestly, because I had a lot of, I knew I gave everything I had in my recovery and in my rehab. So
mm,
if that wasn't enough, but I felt like I did enough, and I felt like I did everything I was asked of me and everything that was required in this type of recovery. All right, I can go out and play because I trusted the people that helped me get there. And so I think anyone in that, recovering from injury is, I think, focusing on the day-to-day tasks. Like, I think it's so easy for us to project into the future. Like, there's enough in today that's hard. Like, stop worrying about a month down the line. Like, do everything today diligently enough, show up the next day, do everything diligently enough, and keep stacking days on top of each other in the recovery process, and trusting that eventually you're going to be healthy, right? And then being okay if you're not, right? Like, at the end of the day, being okay with something not going your way and realizing that you're still going to be all right. Like, your identity and who you are is not tied into what you do. Ultimately, it's not. And I think that gives you the freedom to then go out and play and not be worried if this doesn't work out.
for sure, for sure. That was a really
Yeah.
good sentiment right there.
Yeah.
One reason why I'm excited is because we're gonna have you back on some other time. We don't know when.
Let's
We're
go.
gonna figure out another time to get you on. We needed to get the baseline introduction to Loomis out of the way,
Yeah,
and then
man.
we can really dive into some fun stuff some other time. But really
Yeah, I would
appreciate your
love to.
time.
Yeah,
Thanks for
thanks, man.
coming on, dude. It's been a blast.